My name is Ken Reiher. I was born at Bondi, New South Wales, on the 4th of June 1930. My first memories was moving to Auburn about 1933. We lived there for about 3 years to 36. I can't remember much about it except that we moved about 3 times, I was told, but in the last house we moved to, in Provincial Street, I can relate to that. It was a weatherboard and brick house, average sort of home. I remember Dad building a garage next door to the house, and it's still standing. I saw that a few years ago. The house next door, weatherboard house, I had a friend there, and he had a magpie, a pet magpie, that his wing cut. And it was the end of our friendship actually after a while, because you couldn't walk into that house without the magpie attacking you. And I used to get some fearful pecks off him, and I just couldn't go in the finish. We sort of stripped it apart. In those days there used to be a clothes prop man who'd come up the road with his horse and cart with clothes props on the old cart. There was no rotary clotheslines in those days. He'd be calling out, "Clothes props, clothes props." Wooden clothes prop probably cost you 3 or 4 shillings, I suppose, in those days. No dollars and cents then, all pound shillings and pence. I remember having the tonsils out on the kitchen table, the plug being inserted into the light fitting. Don't know why I didn't go to hospital, but that's how it was done. Lost some tonsils very early in the piece. I remember in the Depression years from 1932 right up to the war, Dad was never out of work. He was in a job that was pretty hard. It wasn't physically hard, but it was mentally hard, because he was a salesman in a clothing shop. And that was pretty tough in the Depression years, because money was tight and a lot of people didn't have any money. But anyway, Dad was never out of work, and in that time he managed to save up and bought a car, a little Singer it was called. It had a rooster on the bonnet. I remember it with its wings outstretched. A maroon car from memory. And every weekend just about we would go off to the beach or up to the mountains. Oh, we had a really good time. And I remember one Sunday we came back from the beach, and there was a message to say that Mum's mum, or my grandma, was very, very ill. She had been sick, but this was a case that we didn't know at the time, but she was dying. But anyway, I had this feeling about not wanting to go, and I did love my grandma, but I used to always like going, but I had this terrible feeling that I didn't want to go, and I didn't. And I'm always regret it, because when Mum and Dad got to the home in Burwood, where her mother was, Mum began to cry, and she hadn't got a handkerchief with her, so Dad went down to the car. And as he went down and opened the door, the Singer had a very sharp corner to the door, and he cut right through his pupil on his left eye, and was blinded from that day in that eye. I always regretted that I hadn't been there really, so I would have run down and probably got the handkerchief, and it would have been okay. But anyway, Dad was blinded in that eye from that time on. He gave us a few hairy moments when he drove at times too after that, because he used to cut corners with his left eye being as it was, but he never had any accidents, and he turned out to be a pretty good driver really overall with one eye. In the houses in those days there was no wire screen doors or fly screens on the windows. You had to be just at the elements, at the mercy of all the insects flying around. And to combat the flies, we used to have these sticky stretches of some sort of a tapey thing it was. You hang from the ceiling, or you hung from the ceiling, and the flies used to be attracted to it, and they'd land on it and be stuck. Well, of course, we used to have them in the kitchen, was the main room, and when you look up and you're having an emergency, all these flies stuck on it. It doesn't sound too crash hot now, and it really wasn't too good then either, but we got used to it, because that was all there was. And then when they'd get full up with the flies and there was no more space left for anyone to land on this sticky tape, we'd take it down and put another one up. And That was the only way you could combat them, because you had to have your windows open through the day to get some cooler air in. And then at night time, of course, it was just as bad, because you had your windows open then, and the mosquitoes had come through, and the moths. Mosquitoes were the worst thing at all, but we used to have what they termed as mosquito nets, and you can still buy them. I've seen them around. But most houses having screens on these days don't seem to worry about mosquito nets. But anyway, we used to have these mosquito nets, and they'd be hanging up by a big hoop at the top of the bed on a hook and cover the whole bed. And every night when you went to bed, you'd hop in quickly so as not to let the mozzies in with you, and tuck yourself in where you'd got in, and you'd be safe for the night. You could hear them buzz around you all night outside the mosquito netting, but they didn't get into you, unless one got in when you got into bed, and then of course you'd have to nail him before he bit you. It was a bit of an effort in those days to try and keep people from being bitten by flaming mosquitoes or what have you. Began school in Auburn at the Auburn kindergarten, I suppose it would have been. I was only a little kid, first classes anyway. And I always remember when we finally were going to move to Manly, which was in 1936. I'd been at school about only about a year or 18 months or something. The teacher had me out the front and saying I was such a good boy, and gave me a real kiss, a real sloppy kiss. I remember it to this day, and I'm 67 now, and really embarrassed me. And anyway, after that we moved to Manly. We moved to Manly, as I said, in 1936, and we moved to a place called Tyree, a big block of flats in Eustace Street, just around the corner from Manly Wharf, and in between the Manly Pool in those days and Manly Oval. And remember, it was flat 12 right up the top of the building, and I remember we had a refrigerator which we'd never had before, a little tiny fridge that used to sit in the wall, about even smaller than a bar fridge, but it was magnificent, and a black telephone, heavyweight black telephone that were all the go in those days. We'd never had a telephone, and it was magic, truly magic. I started school down there at Manly, and I remember there used to be a lolly man in the grounds of the school every morning, and he'd have sherbet bags, and I particularly remember the long pieces of licorice with strips of licorice or circular, round pieces. No, it wouldn't be round. It was a long piece of licorice with a hole up the middle and a little balloon at the end. And we used to, you buy them for a halfpenny or something, whatever it was. Cheap anyway, it wasn't much. Less than a cent. And you'd be blowing these balloons up through this licorice. I always remember that. In those days, Manly Wharf was a brown building, and same as the amusement park which was next door. But I don't think it was actually an amusement park pier in those days. It was just a wharf with storage and things on it. But Manly Wharf itself was all brown timber, and I remember Bert's being on there, and there was a butte swimming pool that ran along from Manly Wharf right up to the you would go west from Manly Wharf up towards Balgowlah, as far as the direction went, and it was a magnificent pool. It had big wheels on the side that you could walk on until you lost your balance and went into the water. There was pontoons out in the middle of the pool that had slippery dips, wheels, and you used to swim out to them. And it was a marvellous pool, and it was packed. It was shark enclosed. It was enclosed so sharks couldn't get in, and it was put up by the Port Jackson Steamship Company. They were the people that owned the ferries that used to come from Sydney to Manly, and to bring the crowds across to Manly and to patronise the ferries, they built this pool, and it was one of the best pools you would have ever found anywhere. It was a magnificent pool, and it used to be packed. It was packed every Sunday afternoon after Sunday school, which I used to go to, at the Methodist school, Methodist Sunday school in those days, and that's in Eustace Street too, still there. We would go to Bert's and get an ice cream, a wafer, 3 coloured wafer, for threepence, I think they were. And we'd unwrap them and we'd put them between the two cones, and we'd walk along the promenade and watch people swimming and jumping in the water. And it really used to be really, really great Sunday afternoons in the summertime. And the place was packed. Over the years, of course, the pools disappeared. It was dismantled when in a terrific storm one night many years ago, and it did so much damage this storm that the whole pool was severely damaged, and they pulled it down, and now they've got nothing like it used to be, but there's some sort of a netting thing there now. But it's a shame that it did go, because it was fabulous. The biggest slippery dip you've ever seen in your life, it must have been about 50 foot high, and you come hair-tailing down. Not that I ever did it, but you come flying down on it. You used to have to water it, of course, because you'd burn all your skin off if you came straight down without any water on the thing. And there used to be a special pump that you could press, and the water would come onto the slippery dip as you went down it. And the people used to do down, they used to go down head first and on their bottoms. It was great. It was really sad to see it all disappear over the years, but anyway. And then Manly Wharf got burnt down one night. We were living in Eustace Street in Tiree, and we could hear the fire engines. We didn't know what was going on, but next morning we found out that Manly Wharf had been burnt to the crisp, worked to the ground, or burnt to the water line. And then they built the new one, and of course it stayed up for many years until they refurbished it just recently, a few years ago. And it was good. There was Burt's was back there, of course, and Scott's fish shop, paper shop, weighing scales, little spot, toilets, and of course it's changed now again. But it used to be great. You'd go to Scott's fish shop and you'd get a penn'orth of chips and sixpence for a piece of fish. We used to go down there at school lunchtime from school and get a penn'orth worth of chips occasionally when I had a penny to spare. Not that I got much. Used to get sixpence. Used to get 7pence a week. Sixpence to go to the pictures. Well, that's a bit later down the track. It wasn't at that stage. But anyway, we'll come to that later. There used to be the Venetian carnivals, that's right, on the East Esplanade in the summer months. Not often, but every year they'd have one, and it would consist of all little boats with coloured lights floating around off the East Esplanade, and you'd be able to sit down in your deck chairs and enjoy looking at all these fairy lights, and all these different boats were arranged in all different styles, and it used to be terrific at night time to see all these little boats, and they'd all be around the East Esplanade between what used to be the Manly what would it be around there? I suppose it was the Manly Sailing Club and the then amusement pier that had been built. There used to be speedboats too that would go from Manly on the side of the amusement pier, and also over in the middle of the promenade that you used to walk across from the Manly Pool. And they were called Let's Go and Let's Go Too. I remember that used to be for $1, I think it was in those days, even $2. It was pretty dear, but of course it was such a thrill to get in the back of a speedboat and race out to halfway to the Heads and back again. It was really a good thing. They used to only be over there on a Sunday, but they were good fun to ride in. And occasionally, in those days, these schools of kingfish would come into the harbour, and they seemed to get herded around into the East Esplanade part where the sailing club was, or just a little bit further down from that, and they'd be caught. You'd literally go down the water's edge and catch them. They were sort of committing a type of suicide type thing. They were huge, big fish. They were a couple of 2 and 3 foot long. They were really big kingfish. And that used to be a spectacular sight when they were on. It didn't happen often, and it never happens now, but it used to happen occasionally in those days. Picture shows in Manly. I remember going to the picture shows. There was the Embassy down opposite Manly Wharf. There was the Rialto in the Corso, the Arcadia round on the front the ocean front, and there was a new Manly Theatre opposite Manly Oval. They've all gone. Nothing there now. I mean, there's nothing there. There's no theatres there. And they used to be good fun. We used to go to the pictures. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. I didn't do this when I was 6, 7. I'm really into the 40s when I told about that. But anyway, I'll pull up on that one now. I think that's about it for the moment. Oh, the trams used to run from Manly Wharf. They'd go out, right out as far as Narrabeen in those days, and up to down to the Spit. They used to go up to the Spitway. They used to go up the side of Raglan Street, up behind the bowling club, cut across Sydney Road, come round in a loop behind some flats, and work their way to the top of the hill. That was the only way they could get up Sydney Road because it was so steep. And you go down to the Spit with that, and that would stop. I don't know whether it went up. They used to go over the bridge. Well, no, I don't know whether they stopped on this side of the bridge and you had to work your way across. I can't remember that. But anyway, that's how you used to get down to the Spit. They didn't have any buses going from... Oh, yeah, that's right. They used to have other trams, I think, going, or buses or something, going from the Spit, other side of the Spit to Sydney. That's the way I used to travel. No buses, not many buses. Well, no buses in Manly. We moved from Eustace Street to a house in Manly Vale, in Innes Road, and I think it was called Kyger. So it was a cement rendered house, cream from memory, left hand side as you go up Innes Road. I remember I was after a scooter for my birthday, for Christmas, and I knew Mum and Dad had bought it, and I was itching to ride it. Anyway, I pestered them and asked them, could I get it just before Christmas? And they said, well, if you get it before Christmas, you're not going to get another Christmas present. Because in those days, not like these days when kids seem to get stacks of presents, you only got the one present generally. Anyway, I insisted on having this scooter. So I got it. They gave it to me. They relented. They gave it to me about 2 days before Christmas. And I was as happy as Larry. Up and down Innes Road I went with this scooter. Great. Christmas Day came, no present. Talk about down the dumps. I felt lousy. Never ever did that again. It just shows you how you should never ever get your presents before the right time. That goes for all presents, birthdays and anniversaries and everything. And I remember that quite clearly. Anyway, we moved again from Kyger to a flat in Whistler Street, and I couldn't tell you the name of that. And then after a while, from there we went up to Marooney, a block of flats at the top of Sydney Road, just down from the fire station. Had a beaut view out across the harbour, right out through the heads. And I remember seeing I think it was the Queen Mary, or Queen Elizabeth. Queen Mary, I think it was, going out the heads one morning when they were moving the troops. It was marvellous to see them sail through the heads. But anyway, that was a little interlude there. Talking about Marooney, I had an auntie. Well, she wasn't actually an auntie, but I used to call her Auntie Thelma, and she used to live at Rose Bay. And she was a really nice lady, and I used to always like seeing her, and Mum taking me to her home on occasions. And I always tried to get, when I knew Mum was going there, I'd always try to get out of going to school so I could go with Mum to see her. Anyway, this particular day, it was in the middle of the week, Auntie Thelma was coming across to see Mum. And I said, can I stay home, and Mum wouldn't be in at this time, because we weren't going to Auntie Thelma's, she was coming to us. So off I went to school. Well, come about 11:30 at school, I get these terrible pains in the stomach, and I couldn't sit down, I couldn't stand up. Anyway, the teacher said, well, go outside and lay down on the the bench out there and see how you feel in half an hour. And it got worse. So at lunchtime, I said I'd have to go home. So the two said, okay. As I was going home, I passed Dad. I was walking through Woolworths on my way up to go to Sydney Road, and I passed Dad. He'd been out having lunch somewhere, and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. He said, why? Auntie Thelma's there, is she? That's why you're going home. I said, no, Dad, I'm really crook. Oh, sure, yeah, you're really crook. You're just going home to see Auntie Thelma. I should make you back to school, but anyway, on your way. Well, I climbed up Sydney Road, and if you know Sydney Road, it's steep. It's right alongside Manly Oval, and it goes up a very, very steep hill. Anyway, I got up there and got home, and then I was really worse. I couldn't move. I couldn't sit down, as I could say. I couldn't stand. Couldn't lay down even that day. So Mum rang Dr. Davis from down the road, and he came straight up, a little different to what it is these days. And he said, I think he's got appendicitis. We better get into hospital. And before he knew where it was, I was in hospital that afternoon, operated on, appendicitis out, and I was in hospital for a week. It just shows the difference now, though, because in those days they kept you in for a week. I came home and I was home for another 4 weeks, which I thought was pretty terrific because I didn't have to go to school. But these days, of course, they get you up on the very first day after the operation, and you're home within a few days and back at work probably straight away. So, I mean, times have certainly changed. But anyhow, that was a little anecdote. Then there was a going to the pictures. That's right. We used to have to pay 6pence to go to the pictures on a Saturday, and I used to get 7pence a week. And to do that, get that 7pence, I used to have to clean out these incinerators, because Dad, why we moved around a lot was that Dad and Mum used to know a builder in Manly who used to build blocks of flats, and he used to have blocks of flats with mainly four units, as we say now, in them. And to make them look like they were good ones, and to make potential tenants, not buyers but tenants in those days, interested in them, he would invite Mum and Dad to move in and have about 6 months rent-free accommodation. And that's why we kept moving around, because he kept building all these flats around Manly. We kept moving around into these blinking units, you know. Anyway, Dad got a job as a caretaker of them, in as much as that he wasn't a full-time caretaker. He used to have to be part-time, and he was working down in Little's in a menswear store. And he had to clean the incinerators out, because people used to just have their rubbish and they'd drop it through this chute. It would fall into an incinerator and it would be burnt. Then it would have to be cleaned out once a week, and so that it wouldn't keep getting clogged up. So Dad said to me, if you want to do that, you can earn yourself 7pence a week. 7pence a week! So I did. I used to have to work down there raking all this muck out and putting it into garbage bins and putting it out the front for the garbage bloke to come. I used to get 7pence for that, 6pence to go to the pictures, and a penny for a curl or an all-day sucker or something. Anyway, that was that little bit about the pictures. After that, after Marooney, we moved again, have a go at this. We keep moving, but this wasn't to the builders' flats. This was to a house up at Regent's Park. It was about 1942 when this happened. And Dad worked in a munitions factory called Babcock's and Wilcox, and it was about a mile down the road, a real good place to be if you got bombed. But anyway, that didn't happen, fortunately. But Mum and Dad were a little bit worried about my safety at that stage, and they sent me off, evacuated me up to Katoomba, which was another 50 miles up into the mountains, and about 20 minutes there in a fast plane. But anyway, I was up there for about 6 weeks, and I couldn't hack it. I didn't like being away from home, so I asked could I come back, and they were only too glad to get me back home again. We then moved from Regent's Park to a flat in Burwood, which is just across the road from Parramatta Road in Concord Road. It's on the right-hand side, half a block up. And that's how I learned to cook grilled chops, mashed potatoes and peas. Mum and Dad had both got jobs. So in the war years there was such a shortage of men that was when the women actually started to really get into the workforce. And Dad was only with his one eye. It was no good for army service. He always reckoned he was Australia's last hope. If they ever called him up, they were really in trouble. But anyway, so they were out at work each day, and when I'd come home from school, I'd go across the butcher shop and buy 3 lamb chump chops, and we'd get potatoes. We used to buy stuff every day in those days. You didn't go to a supermarket and buy the whole week's supply in one whack. You used to go down every day to get all these things. 3 lamb chump chops, a few spuds, half a pound of peas or something. And I'd shell the peas, because you didn't have any frozen peas in those days. It was all hand shelled. I'd get the peas and I'd shell them and I'd put them on, and I'd put the potatoes on, and I'd grill the chops, and I became the greatest exponent of grilled chops. And I still can cook them pretty well. And that's where I learned to do that. And then from Burwood, oh no, it was a little story about Burwood. I was going to school up near Concord there, and I had this terrible tooth. My teeth were crook. They were really bad teeth. They were very chalky anyway. They were still my first. I don't know, they couldn't have been the first teeth, surely. Anyway, they had to come out, all these front teeth, and of course I was called the fang at school. You can just imagine how it is to go to school with no front teeth and just 2 eye teeth, plus your others, of course, but you've got this great gap in the middle of your mouth, and they called me the fang, and it was a very, very embarrassing time. I didn't like it at all. And anyway, fortunately, we moved from there back down to, where did we go this time? We went back to Manly, I think it was. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Dad bought a shop in Crown Road, Queenstrip, a little corner grocer's shop. He was into these little corner shops because he liked working for himself, and he used to buy them. You used to pay. I think in those days he paid £250 for the shop. That was for the goodwill, and I think it was a couple £100 worth of stock. It was amazing how much stock you could get for 200 quid in those days, because there were only half a loaf of bread cost you 5p halfpenny. A pound of butter was about a shilling. Sugar was 8p, £2. And it was so, I mean, it's all relevant, of course, as what we were earning those days to what we earn these days. But anyway, and he bought this little shop, and it was a very good one. He did quite well out of it. So I started off back at Manly Boys Junior High. Manly Boys Junior High, that was right. And I began in first year in 1943, I think it was. And I started off in 1D. And of course, all the teachers, most of the men teachers were all at war. So we had these lady teachers. Most of the lady teachers came from Sydney on the ferry. They used to get the 8 o'clock ferry from Sydney, and they'd get over to Manly at about 20 to 9, and then start work at 9 o'clock. So anyway, we used to nick down to the wharf when we felt like it, and we'd just check the teachers getting off the ferry. And we could always tell how many free periods we were going to get, because we'd say, oh, Miss English is not in today, and we've got her for 2 periods this morning, so we won't have anyone to teach us there. That's 2 periods of Wacko. And Miss Harwood won't be there in the afternoon. Oh, that's another geography teacher. And we used to work out how many free periods we're getting, because they never used to give you a teacher to replace them, because they just didn't have them. And of course we used to have more free periods. It's a wonder any of us ever got through school at all, I mean, I did leave early anyway, but I mean, stone me. We used to have probably half a day off without doing any work, every day practically, because the teachers were always taking days off. Anyway, that was doing that. Oh, and then hilarious. The following year I got into 2F. You couldn't get any lower than 2F. That was as low as you could get in second year. And we had a teacher called Miss Plum, and in the grounds of the school we had these air raid shelters, because the war was still on, and they were sort of an oblong type building above ground. They weren't sunken into the ground. They were above the ground with a very thick cement roof, so that if a bomb supposedly hit it, it wouldn't penetrate the cement, which is a lot of baloney. But anyway, and on top of the roof of the air raid shelters, they finished up putting a wire fence around it with a gate and steps up to it. And Miss Plum used to get us boys, 2F, the toughest lot of kids in the whole school virtually, up on top of the air raid shelter, doing barn dances. Not PT, not proper PT, but a barn dance. And of course the girls' school was right next door, and they used to look out their windows and they'd get hysterical. All these tough, supposedly tough second-year kids. You can just imagine what you'd be like. I mean, by this time you're 13. You see, you're 12 and 13, and you think you're the cat's whisker. You think you're really cool. And they all laughed. They're laughing their heads off the girls. Oh, it was an embarrassment. Actually, in that year, 2F, I got a certificate for the most improved boy in the class. I really got fizzed off with being in 2F. And I remember one particular, we used to have all these little tests through the weeks. One particular test was a geography test. And I really swatted hard. I went home and I studied it. And I used to be a lousy student. I used to study all this particular geography. I went to school next day, breezed through it, got 96. Couldn't believe it, the teacher. Thought I must have been in a daze or something. But anyway, from then on I sort of really worked at it, and I did improve quite a bit, and I did want to get out of the 2F, and so I got the certificate. It's the only time I ever got a certificate from school in my whole life, and I I was so embarrassed about it being 2F, I never showed anybody it. I had it hung up in my wardrobe, and that was where it stayed. I don't know what happened to it after a while. It got lost in all the moving around we had. And then there was this little story about, I hated tech drawing. See, when we were in the lower classes, like 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and 2C, that's right, and they used to be what they call it, I don't know what they call them, but they were languages and other languages, say, and then the classes below that, D, E and F, were supposed to be woodwork tech drawing classes. Well, I hated tech drawing. I hated it. And I said to Mum one day, gee, I hate tech drawing. Mum, do you think I could go and do a maths, swap it over for maths? And I used to skip tech drawing classes. When it came around to tech drawing, I'd go down the road. I'd slip through the gate of the school and go down to the Ocean Beach and bomb out down there for a couple of periods, because they used to be twin periods. Or I'd go and lay down around the corner in one of the seats, and if any of the teachers came in and say I would crook. And I got away with this for weeks. I used to just skip it all the time. Anyway, Mr. Donaldson was the tech drawing teacher. I remember him clearly. Anyway, I said to Mum one day, do you think I could do some maths instead of tech drawing? Because I'm very shaky on maths and not very good on tech drawing anyway, but I'd sooner do maths. Oh, that's a great idea. I'll go down and see the headmaster. I thought, you beauty, get out of this tech drawing. So anyway, one afternoon I was in woodwork period, as it turned out, and there's a kid comes across to see Mr. I don't know what his name was, the woodwork teacher anyway, and said, Ken Reiher's wanted over at the headmaster's office. I thought, that's right, Mum's over there. So over I trotted, and Mr. Owen was the headmaster, Tubby Owen we called him, a little tubby, fat guy. And he said, what's this about you wanting to do mathematics instead of tech drawing? Oh, I said, I don't like tech drawing, headmaster. I said, I just can't handle it. Well, he said, go and get Mr. Donaldson, the tech drawing teacher, and bring him over to the office. I want to have a word with him. I thought, holy smoke, I'm gone, I'm stonkered. So I had to go. So I went across to tech drawing teacher, Mr. Donaldson. Mr. Donaldson, Mr. Owen wants to see you. What's it about? I don't know, sir. We go back to the office. Mr. Owen says to Mr. Donaldson, this chap Reiher, he doesn't like tech drawing. Mr. Donaldson looked at me and said, I've never seen him. And Mr. Owen said, what do you mean you haven't seen him? He said, he's never in the class. Uh-oh. Mr. Owen says to me, what have you been doing? Where have you been? You haven't been away sick, has he? He said to his mother, to Mum. No, Mum said he's not. He's been at school all the time. What have you been doing? And of course it all came out. I had to tell him. Well, that stonkered the mathematics class right on there. And I finished up with 4 cuts of the cane and told not to repeat skipping tech drawing again. Well, I didn't really like it at all, but luckily Mr. Donaldson was the sports master for the football team. And every sports day, if it was an away game, he'd take the team away to whichever school it was they were playing at. Anyway, the half-yearly test came round for tech drawing, and I thought, oh, this is going to be no good. I'm going to get bombed out here because I didn't know the work at all. I couldn't even do it. I didn't have any idea. It was hopeless. I was all right in a bit of theory, but I wasn't worth 2 bob practical. So I thought I'll skip this. I won't skip it. I won't go to the exam. I'll stay home sick. So I kidded I was sick to Dad and Mum, and they used to believe me. You know, I used to really be a good actor. I got stuck. I got conned once, or they conned me once. Anyway, they said, all right, stay home if you're not well. Okay, so I stayed home. The very next day, I go back to school. Mr. Donaldson's taken a team away, would you believe, a football match. And he saw me in the playground and he said, Reiher, you can do that test today that you missed yesterday. Oh, no. So anyway, he gave me the paper, put me in the classroom with a few of the guys who didn't play football, who I knew, and off he went with his team. Well, I'm sitting there like a stuffed owl looking at the paper and not understanding any of it. And one of the guys said to me, "You're having problems?" And he was a good tech drawing pupil, this guy. And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Would you like me to do the paper?" Oh, I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, don't make it too good because you know it's not me." So he said, "Okay." So he fiddled around with it and I finished up getting 52 and got a pass. And, you know, I thought that was pretty cunning, that. Yeah. Anyway, but it's still, you know, it didn't do me much good because really I should have probably tried to learn tech drawing, but I didn't like school. I really didn't like. I liked watching footy and listening to all the shows on the radio at night. Not Blue Hills, no, that wasn't one then. Dad and Dave, Mrs. Obbs, First Light Fraser, Martin's Corner, all those ones, they were beaut. Search for the Golden Boomerang. I used to sit home and watch them. I mean, I know Mum and Dad were a bit slack, but of course they had the shop, you see, and they were busy in the shop and they sort of let me to my own devices. And, you know, I couldn't blame them. It was just me. I was just a bit of a mug. I didn't like it. Actually, in 1944, that was the beginning of 3rd year. No, 44, 45. That must have been 45, beginning of 45. We moved to our new school from Manly to Balgowlah. And it was we named it Shacktown because it was only just all wooden buildings, bar the toilet block was the only brick building in the whole thing, and talk about bushy. We were the very first bunch of boys to go to that school. I can honestly say that I was a pioneer of the Manly Boys High School in Balgowlah. We used to go up by double-decker buses in those days and they'd dump us off and we'd be at school. But it was a rough old playgrounds and stuff. There wasn't any playgrounds, it was just, there was one part of cement just in the front of the main weatherboard buildings, but the rest of the place was all rough bushes and trees, stunted little trees and stuff, and I ripped a long pair of trousers that Mum had bought especially for going into the new year, ripped them the first day there, and I was scared stiff to go home and tell them. Anyway, she fixed them up, but oh boy, it was a mess. But anyway, that was the very first, I was in the very first batch to go up there, and after about 2 months I left. I didn't do the intermediate certificate, which was the end of the 3rd year, and that was the end of my schooling as far as going to school was concerned, and I was never so happy as when that happened. After that, Dad moved to Fairfield, about April 44. And he bought another shop. And I worked in the shop with Dad and Mum, because there was no way I was going back to school. They used to herd sheep down our street in those days. It was so countrified at Fairfield. We were on the corner of Paulding Street. I don't know what the other name of the street was, the other street, but it used to be, they used to herd sheep, and it was all poultry farms. It was really, really countrified. And Barbara and I went back there a few years ago to see the place, to see if we could find it, and it had gone. The shop had gone, and there was a big garage on the corner, and the whole area was supermarkets and shopping centre. And the only way I could recognise where it had been was a little butcher shop. It used to be across the road from us in the old days, a little brick butcher shop who I used to be mates with, the young bloke who worked there, and it was still there a few years ago, and that was the only spot I could identify in the whole of the area, because the place had been built up tremendously over the last 30, 40 years, since the war anyway. And, you know, it was hard to believe. You would have got lost there. You wouldn't have just picked the place at all. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Could have. The war finished up there, thank goodness, in 1940, in August 45. Yeah, I lost my first job there too. I got the sack, would you believe, the one and only time in my life. I'd got a job working for a tea company, Gibson's Tea. They're gone, they're out of action now, they're not around, they've been around for years. And anyway, I was going to be a tea boy, in the sense that I used to sit in the truck with the driver, and he'd go into the shop and he'd get an order from the shopkeeper how many cartons of tea he'd want, or coffee essence, and tell me, and I'd nick out of the car and truck and bring them into the shop, you see. Anyway, this is how I used to go to work in those days. I used to pedal my bike from our shop to Fairfield railway station, which was about 2 kilometres. From Fairfield station, I'd get a train to Central Station in Sydney, which is a fair rail trip, as you know. From there, I'd get a tram out the front in Eddy Avenue out to Bondi Junction, and find this chap who used to drive the T-van, and we would go from there and do our runs around Bondi and Rose Bay and I can't remember where else, but anyway. Well, of course, it was miles away, you know, from Fairfield to Bondi Junction. I used to do that every day. You get home, I'd come back the same way, tram, train, pedal the bike. I used to get home at 7 o'clock at night. It was hopeless. So anyway, the company thought, well, all right, we'll make him a bit closer. Give him a job at Top Ride. So then we had to ride the bike down to the station, get a train to Strathfield, change trains, get a train from Strathfield back to Bottom Ride, and then get a bus. Now, I don't think it was any closer, to be honest, but anyway. One day, in those days, we used to have all these blackouts. There was a major power shortage straight after the war, because of all the industries that were starting up, and the power stations, Bunurong was as old as the hills, and they couldn't cope with all the power. And we used to have days when you would have certain days of the week you'd be blacked out for so many hours, so there wasn't such a drain on the power. You were regulated like that. It was it. But occasionally there'd be a major breakdown unannounced, and I was on this train coming down from Fairfield to Strathfield, and there's a blackout, and the train stops about half a mile out from the railway station. So I sat there in the train with all the other workers, and we got into Strathfield eventually, about 20 minutes late. Well, everything, of course, was thrown out of tilt then. I was way behind with getting the train up to Bottom Ride, and the bus timetable was all up to the mud. So anyway, when I got this guy place, he was ropeable. He was flaming mad. And it taught me one big lesson. If you're ever going to be late for work, ring up and tell him you're going to be late, because you cover yourself. I didn't do this. It taught me a lesson. He dobbed me in, and I got the sack. I went into work on the following Monday, on the Friday when the payday was there. They said, what do you want to take, a week's notice or a week's pay? I said, I'll take the week's pay, thank you very much, even though it was only about 15 and a half, and took the money and went. And I thought to myself, isn't that marvellous? It taught me a good lesson. No, you never ever not ring up when you're running late, because it just makes it covers yourself for that confounded time. It really upset me. Anyway, then I got a job at Palmer's in Sydney at a menswear store. FJ Palmer's. They were menswear on the corner of Pitt and Park Street. I was only a kid. I was 15 and a half by this time. And of course, it was the war had ended, and it was a great time for everybody. The war had finished. Money there was a certain amount of money around. Ex-servicemen, all the servicemen were coming back and getting discharged, and they had a bit of cash. But clothing was very short. We were still on coupons in those days for clothing. Anyway, Palmer's used to have a workshop at the top of on the top floor. We used to make the Stamina sports trousers. A big workshop with must have been 100 or so girls working up there on sewing machines making these trousers, and we used to bring them down in bundles of 50s and all different sizes and put them up around the shelves in the menswear department, which I was in. I really enjoyed working at Palmer's. Anyway, I think coupons went off not long after that, and Palmer's used to advertise regularly in the Thursday night's paper for their clothes, what they had. We used to spell a pair of sports trousers in those days. Yeah, so I had to turn over the tape. I didn't know I'd run out. So the trousers were about £4.90 Leathermans, and the suit was about £12, and a nice overcoat was about £15. And the idea was that, that's right, they had 5 entrances to Palmer's, all round the store, because it was a corner, you see, and they advertised all these trousers were going to be on sale. Some trousers were going to be on sale this Friday morning. So they opened the doors all at once, and the customers hit us from every angle you could name. And they hit the counters. Now our counters weren't fixtures, they were loose, and they pushed the counters back and pinned us literally against the wall of the store. We couldn't move. And it was a case of getting crushed almost. Fortunately, sanity prevailed, and they managed to ease back, and we pulled the counters back. And then chaos reigned, of course, still while we're trying to serve everybody, but at least we weren't getting crushed. And we must have lost hundreds, well, not hundreds, we must have lost some strides those days, because you'd have a customer and he'd want to try and want to go on a fish, and you never see him again. In the change, you never see him again. And when you go in later, you find this tatty old pair of strides hanging on the hook, and you knew you hadn't got the new guy or the fella to come out and pay for them. So anyway, from then on though, the next day from then on, they used to only open one door at a time and allow 10 customers in, and we'd serve them, and then as they got out they'd let more in, so that it was only always on a more regulated basis and a much more satisfactory arrangement for the salesperson as well as the customers. I set a record in that store when I was a junior. I was only about 15 or 16, and we used to get 10 and 6 bonus for every £100 of goods we sold. And in 2 days I sold £200, £110 one day and 90 the next, because you've got your indexes with each sale you wrote down. Anyway, it set a record, never to be broken, in pounds, shillings and pence, I believe. And I earned myself a guinea bonus. But the seniors in the store weren't very impressed by this, because they reckoned I was nicking their bonuses. Because what I would do, a customer would come and I'd shoot out, "Yes sir, can I help you?" "Yes, pair of trousers, right." Shoot out again as soon as I'd served him. Coat, pair of sports trousers, yes. And I finished up, I sharked, as they termed it, sharked all the seniors. Well, as I say, I made this guinea in 2 days on top of my ordinary pay, and that used to pay for my tobacco and my combined bus and ferry ticket, and it was good, and it gave me the money, my ordinary pay, clear. But the seniors didn't like it, so they sent me down to the stock room, and I was down there for 4 days working on stock. So they covered, they covered their own losses pretty smartly, and taught me another lesson, that you take your time as a junior, you wait for the seniors to get a customer, and then if there's a spare customer comes in and there's no seniors around, you pop in and you serve them. As it turned out, I still used to make a guinea or so a week anyway, but I learnt that seniors do have priority. Yeah, well, what did Dad do then? I think we went and bought a shop in Pittwater Road. He went and bought a shop in Pittwater Road. Just around from Wentworth Street. I don't know whether I've told you that, but anyway, if I have, I'm sorry if I've repeated myself. And then from there he bought a residential in Darley Road in Manly, which was a place where there was rooms and you just more or less let them, and the people made their own cooking arrangements in the room. It was pretty basic, but and we used to get rent for them. But anyway, the lease ran out and we had to get out. And actually just before we got out, Dad bought a shop up in Harbord Road called the Polar Bar. And it was part butcher, part grocery. Now, the butcher shop took up 2/3 of it, and the grocery shop took up the other third, and the bloke sold us the grocery part. Anyway, your mum, Barbie Katz, met me there. She used to be a prefect on the buses, school prefect on the buses, and she used to go past every day. Anyway, one day she was walking past the shop after she'd come home from school with a girlfriend, and she looked in and saw me at the counter, and she said, would you believe this? He's mine. She's 15, mind you. I'm about 17. And she used to come up and buy groceries on a regular basis then, and then she'd always forget something and she'd come back again. Oh, she was a cunning little coot. And even the butcher used to call her, here comes Mrs. Reiher, as he saw her walking up the street. Dad always thought she was a good sort. Reckoned she'd be a good wife, and he was dead right. She's the best. She's my wife, your mum, your grandma, and your great-grandma. You mightn't know her, but she was the best. First time I asked Barbie out, it was to the showground, to the speedway. And it was a Saturday night. And I said, I'll pick you up in the van or the car or whatever I said, I don't remember now. But anyway, our van or car was an old white truck, an old Chevy truck that had no doors, wooden seat, and the chassis used to lift up when we went round corners. And your mum did herself up really nice, got herself all dirtied up, and all was blowing windswept. By the time she got to Manly Wharf, her hair was a mess because she thought it was a mess anyway, because there was no doors on the car, but she looked good. We went over by ferry, and then we got a tram out to the showground. And in the tram, we're hanging up on the strap because there was no seats in the tram. No, we couldn't get a seat in the tram. Everyone was sitting around it, and we were hanging onto the straps. And I happened to say, what do you know? Make conversation. What's your favourite song? She says, Near You. Isn't it nice? She didn't say that. She just said, Near You. But everyone in the compartment started to laugh. Oh, they thought it was hilarious. Yeah. I used to go to the pictures. I used to go to pick Barbie up on a Saturday night, get a bus up. Didn't have any car, no car. Used to get a bus up to Barbie's place and maybe have tea there, and then we'd get a bus back down to Manly and go to the pictures Saturday nights. And then we'd usually come out of the pictures at about 10:30. The buses used to leave Manly Wharf at 20 to 11, or 22 and 10 past. That was what the time was. And we used to sweat on. You'd be watching the clock to see if you could get, out of the picture show and down to the buses before they left at 20 to 11, or 10 past. If you missed them, you're in strife. You really had to wait a long while. There wasn't any after about 10 past 11. That was the last ones. Anyway, and then of course it used to be bedlam, because if the pictures all the picture shows opened up, came out at the same time, there'd be people streaming down the Corso, down Wentworth Street, and down opposite the wharf, and it all hit the buses together. So anyhow, we'd get home eventually, and we'd be sitting on the back step having a bit of a cuddle and a kiss. and I'd see the bus, the last bus going down back to Manly, go by. As I looked across the backyard, I could see the top of the bus going back to Manly. And I thought, oh no. This happened on a regular basis anyway. I got used to it after a while. Barbie had a bike, a girl's bike, and used to have to pedal down over Queenscliff Bridge on this blinking bike, nearly killing myself. It was a hairy old ride, I tell you, on a girl's bike, and then bring it back on Sunday. Ah, boy. Anyway, Dad sold the shop. We both finished up back at Palmer's then. I don't know, I must have left and started again, because I know I went backwards and forwards about 4 times to Palmer's. They always took me back because I was a good salesperson. And Dad was the best. Anyway, we were on the ferry coming home one night from Palmer's, and we saw the Orion, or one of those big ships, going out back to England, and Dad said, gee, it'd be good to go to England, wouldn't it? And I said, yeah, why don't we go? And he said, yeah, why don't we? So he came home and told Barbara that he was going home. He told Mum that we're all going to go to England. And I said, well, if I'm going to go to England, can we take Barbara with us? And they said, okay. So we went down, and we got Barbie's permission from her dad. We went down, because Barbie had aunties in London, Auntie Bertie and Auntie Nellie, and at Tottenham in London. So anyway, Mum, we got our boat seats, boat passages, and we went to England. We'd got engaged, incidentally, before that. Barbara and I got engaged. She was about, must have been about 17, and I was about 20. And when we got to England, we stayed, as I say, in Tottenham. Actually went and saw the Tottenham Hotspurs playing at White Hart Lane. Went to Arsenal, saw Arsenal play. Saw Glasgow Rangers play. We saw a few teams play in those days. We used to go to footy a lot. Anyway, we got married in England, Barbie and I. 7 and 6pence it cost us. 2 and 6 deposit, and 5 shillings down on the day we got married. The banns had to be up for 3 weeks, and I think we got married with about 4 other couples in the registry office. Frida, Barbara's pen friend from way back when she was at school, and she still corresponds with her, and we have met them just a few years ago. They came out to Australia, and we've met them when we've been to England. Barbie's been over to England 4 times, I've been over there 3 times, and we meet them each time. We'll meet them at Frida each time, and her husband. Yeah. Anyway, Frida came down from Lancashire, brought a wedding cake down, would you believe? We didn't have a very big reception, as you can imagine, because we knew nobody in England other than the aunties. And she brought this wedding cake down, and we had our little reception in Auntie Bertie's house, and then we went for our honeymoon up to Edinburgh in Scotland. And stone me, was it cold up there. There was ice inside the room each morning. Probably good honeymoon weather, but by crikey, it was cold. We came back from England, and I restarted my job at Palmer's. I had a leave of absence for the 3.5, 4 months I was away. Anyway, not long after I started again, Palmer's sold out to a clothing company called Cooey's. And Cooey's men all took over the senior positions, and Cooey's, in their wisdom, decided to cut all bonuses out. In other words, all the little 10 and 6pences we used to earn for our £100 worth of sales went by the board. And it made a big difference to my pay, because I used to get my ferry fares, as we know, and the tobacco and what have you, out of that bonus, and I got really cheesed off with that. Anyway, there was a job being advertised in the Manly Daily for a bread carter in Harbourwood, and money we were going to save on the fares, plus the fact that it was a couple of pound, I think £1 or £2 more money, induced me to apply for the job. And I went and saw Jack Myers, and he said, well, let me know next day. If I rang the next day, let me know if I had the job. And when I rang, he said, "You've got it. You can start, whenever you give notice to your company you're working for now, and you can start immediately after you left them." So I gave a week's notice, and I started at Myers Bakery. But I got a terrible shock the first morning. I didn't realise that it was a horse and cart that I was going to deliver the bread on, and never having seen a horse close up, I was a bit startled when I saw the cart propped up out the front in the bakery, and Jack said to Ike, the other bread carter, "Will you show Ken how to load the cart and then show him how to saddle a horse?" I nearly died of shock. I thought I was going to get a truck. So anyway, I went up the back with Ike, and he pulls out some of the harness, and the first thing the horse did was to stand on my foot with his great big hoof. Nearly crushed my toes first go. Anyway, Ike reckoned that they always do things like that to new people. Horses are cunning. When I was with Jack, and I bread carted there for about 3 years, I think it was. The first Christmas was funny. I loaded up the cart, because it was a long weekend, I think, and I went up to the first house, and inside the servery was a little envelope with 2 shillings for the baker. Now, we're not talking lots of money like we are these days. We're talking £12 a week. But £12 a week those days was probably equivalent to $100, I suppose, these days. Anyway, I got this 2 shillings, and I went to the next flat, and opened up the servery, and there's a note, 10 shillings for the baker. What? Well, after I'd been going around the run for a while, I had money coming out of all my pockets, and it was embarrassing. I didn't know where to put it all. And in fact, when I got to some houses and they didn't leave me a tip, I got really cheesed off. When I finishing the run that night, and I went home with all my goodies, I had £24 in money. I had probably a dozen bottles of beer, 2 or 3 bottles of wine, enormous amount of handkerchiefs, braces, belts, you name it, I had it. And Pop couldn't believe it Pop Kellen couldn't believe it when he saw what I'd brought home. And that went on for the 3 years I was there, because I used to look after customers in those days, and it was a zoned area. In those days there was only one baker could go up one area, and of course some of the bakers didn't give a continental as to how they looked after their customers, but I really looked after them. I'd run back the cart and get them a bun loaf or bread rolls or whatever they wanted, and it paid off in a big dividend in the finish. And when Gail was born, she was born on the 24th of the 8th, 64. When she was born, I got little dolls and little dresses and all these things from the customers, because they knew Barbara had the baby. So it was really good. Anyway, I decided to get out of the bakery business at that stage and get into the fire brigade. Before that, actually, at night time when I worked in the bakery, I used to go and work as an usher in the Queenscliff Picture Show, and I did that for about 3 nights a week, I think it was, and to make extra money. And we used to work at the Queenscliff Theatre. It was known as the Bug House. It was an old picture show. Actually, I think it may even still be there to this day, but I think it's a squash court now. And it was extra coin in those days, which helped out. Anyway, I decided to join the fire brigade because that was a better money again, or so I thought. And I did my training at Bondi Junction, and then was posted to Manly, which was number 24. I always remember that number, because each fire station had its own number. And I was in that for about 18 months. And after that, I went back to the bakery. And while I was in the fire brigade, Jim was born on the 9th of the 6th, 66. And the family was growing. My mum had passed away on the 25th of the 4th, 56, on Anzac Day. And Dad had passed away on the 29th of the 6th, 1960. And Pop, Barbara's dad, died on the 26th of the 3rd, 62. So the house had a lot of bad memories for us, really, because Dad had come to stay with us and live with us when Mum had died. And little Greg had got killed up near the school when he stepped out onto the roadway. A taxi hit him. That was on the 27th of the 5th, 1960. So that time was pretty sad for the family. I left the fire brigade and went back to the bakery, and then we moved to Perth. Decent sort of a move, you would say. We bought a house at Nollamara, and I worked in a bakery, Burnett's Bakery at Como. And if ever there was a slave driver, he was a slave driver. I mean, I don't mind working, but by golly, he was tough. I joined the Doubleview Bowling Club, and that's when I first started to bowl. So I was in 1963. We went to Perth. And we lived in Perth for 3 years, and in that time Steve came along on the 27th of 1065. I got the opportunity to come back to Sydney, inasmuch as Jackie Myers offered me a job back there, and I'd got fed up with working at this bakery because it was really a hard slog. So we moved back to New South Wales. I came back first and stayed with Auntie Ethel, and Barbara came over with the kids about a month later. Now, I think most of all of you know Beryl and Ken Stapleton. They live in Ryde, Top Ryde. And Kenny had a spare house in Cupper Road. He said we could have a use of that as long as we liked. And actually he said that we could live in that house for as long as we liked, rent-free, and he'd provide us with I think the furniture and everything at that stage. And so long as Barbara would keep friendly with Beryl. But we couldn't accept that, because that would be a real bludge, and I just couldn't wear it. I'd got a job back at the bakery at Harbord, and I used to drive backwards and forwards each day. Had a little, what did we buy? We bought a new car in Perth, finished up being a little Tin Lizzie thing. I can't even think of the name of it now, but anyway, we sold that eventually, and I got a truck from Jack, and I used to go backwards and forwards to work in that, from Ryde to Harbord, because I got the job back at the bakery. But anyway, we couldn't stay in Ryde, we just didn't feel right about it, bludging, virtually. So we bought a house at Colorado Plateau. And guess what? I worked at the bakery again. No, I was still working at the bakery, that was right. When I was at Ryde, I worked at the bakery, and when we moved to Colorado Plateau, I just changed addresses. And after a while, Jackie Myers sold the bakery to Fielder's Bakery. And then their rationalisation of the industry and their bakery, they decided to close it down and offered me a job over at Redfern in their bakery over there, but I wasn't interested in that, so I left. And jobs were easy to get in those days. This was about, what was it, 60, we came back from Perth in 66, 67, 68, about 69, 70, I don't know when it was, 70, anyway, it must have been sometime in the 70s. I got a job at Grace Brothers at Chatswood. I started off in the wine and spirits department, and was working there okay, enjoying it. And then the morning before I went on holidays, in about the second year I think it was, and the manager of the department asked me to move a cask of wine, and I jagged my back at the base, and oh gee, it was crook. And I went on holidays that night, but I had a lousy 2 weeks. I stood on the shower for hours the first night just trying to get back to work, and it wasn't any good for the whole holiday. So I decided to come back at work on the Monday, whenever it was, 2 weeks later, and just walk down into the stock room and kid I'd hurt my back there, because if I'd said I'd hurt my back on holidays, I wouldn't have been able to get any compo. Not that I wanted any lump sum, but I just wanted to be able to go to a doctor and have all the things paid for by the compensation crowd, because I actually did do it at work. So I went and reported I'd hurt my back, and they sent me to the doctor in the shop, which they had a special doctor upstairs, and he sent me off to a X-ray department, and it came back that I had a narrowing disc at the base of the spine, and I had aggravated it. So Gracebus did the right thing by me and gave me an opportunity to go I became a supervisor and worked in the house stationery, which involved all the stationery for the store, from dockets to rubbers to book covers to everything in general, paper bags for the supermarket. It was a good job. I enjoyed it. There could have my own little storeroom, and the stock used to come in and I'd look after it, and then I used to have to look after all these different departments in the store. There was a hell of a lot of departments, of course. Gracebus at Chatsworth was a big store, and then all the phone books would come in and have to deliver the phone books around. I enjoyed it. I really had a good time at Gracebus. I enjoyed it. Actually, everywhere I've worked I've enjoyed, bar at Burnett's in Perth. And then we decided to sell the house on the plateau and move to Armadale, because Jim and Julie had gone up there with the kids, or with Simon Peter, and I think Danny had been born by then. No, Timmy and Gabriel weren't. They were born up in Armadale. I'm not sure about Danny, but anyway. So they'd moved up there. Jim had got out of the ambulance service and had gone up there. So we met Tom and Mary Hanson when we were up there to see Jim and Julie one time, looking at their house, looking at Jim and Julie's land that they'd bought, not the house. And Tom was involved in a bit of a real estate agency. He thought he was a bit of a real estate agent. He said, there's a nice block of land around the corner up here. So he took us round to it and showed us the block of land that finally became home for us. Actually, it was called Nollamara. Well, we called it Nollamara after our time in Perth. It was on a 5-acre lot, and it was we had a good time out there. It was a nice area because there was not much around at that stage. It was a sort of a big what's the word for it? I can't think. It's an estate, and all the land was broken up into 5-acre lots, so that we didn't have anybody close to us at all for a long while, until somebody built next to us in the finish, but he was still about 200 yards away, 300 yards away. And then Tom and Mary moved away from it, because they would live round the corner, and we were real good friends with them. And they moved from we moved first. That's right. We moved after we'd been out of Nollamara out of Armadale for about must have been, I don't know how many years we were out there for. It was a long while, because we lived in Armadale for 14 years. Anyway, we sold the house in 2 hours, I think it took. It was a record time to sell, record quickness for selling a house. And we went and bought a house at Drummond Avenue, number 2 Drummond Avenue. Unfortunately, there was a block of units next door, old-fashioned ones that I didn't really pay much attention to, which was a big mistake really, because by gee, we had some shocking neighbours over the years there. Checking back over the tape, I just realised Jim hadn't left the ambulance service when he and Julie moved to Armadale. He just a transfer up to there and was in it for a few years before going back to university. We moved into Armadale, and that was right. And as I said, we had some crook neighbours over those years, and the fence was all falling down between ourselves and the units next door, so we decided to put a new one up. And the flats had changed hands as far as the owners were concerned, and he was more keen as we were to put. He was as keen as we were to put a new fence up. So we put a big metal one up. It was about it was over 6 foot high, and it did make such a difference to our house, and it also gave us much more privacy. But it had only just been put up a few months, and some people were sitting outside one of the units next to the fence, and the little kid was throwing a ball against it. It was making a heck of a row because it was a metal fence, and it really resounded to sound, you know. Anyway, Mum was hanging out clothing on the clothesline, and she was really getting fed up with this banging, banging, banging. And she said, "Can you stop doing that?" She couldn't see anybody, she could hear them talking and the kid banging the fence. "Can you stop doing that?" And one of the people said, "Well, what have you got such a big fence up for? And a metal one." And Mum she was so mad, she said, "To keep rabble like you out." And she told me that when I came home from work, and I thought, well, this is going to be lovely. I'll probably get belted up one morning going to work or something, because they'll come in and damage the garden or make a real mess of the fence. But anyway, as it turned out, nothing did happen, which was good. But I don't think she should have really blown a top at them like they did. Not like your mother to blow a top. And then there was the other time when I was going to work up at the uni. This was a bit jumping down the track a little bit, but I'll fit the story in here. I was getting up early in the morning, 4:45 I had to get up in those days, and I could hear this guitar playing, and it was coming from the flats. And it was quite loud, and I mean that time of the morning it was a pretty quiet street normally, but anyway you could hear this guitar twanging away. So after I'd had breakfast and was ready to go to work, I shot into the flats, and I found the door open to one of the units where this noise was coming from, guitaring was coming from. So I knocked on the door, and no one could hear me, so I walked in, and the place was a real shambles, there was stuff everywhere, clothes all over the floor and food all over the kitchen table. Anyway, I kept going into I went into the other room, the lounge room, and I said to the guy, this guy was sitting on the lounge chair playing guitar, and the place reeked of marijuana. It was absolutely, it was crook. Anyway, I said, "What are you doing, mate?" I said, "It's a bit early to be playing the guitar. You've got people next door trying to get sleep, and the next door neighbours to here are trying to get sleep." And he says, "That's all right, son." He says, "Would you like a drag on a fag?" He was as high as you could get practically on this marijuana. I said, "No, I got to go to work." He said, "Oh, gee, so have I." So anyway, I said, "Well, can you can the guitaring?" He said, "Oh, okay." So I went back and got in the car, and as I was driving out, he came out and got into his car. But I would like to see where he was working, or how he did work, because he was pretty high. I got a job at Hannah's. And actually that was a funny story, because originally they wanted a Santa Claus, and I'd been to the Social Security, and Robert Hannah at the time, they sent me round there, and at the time they weren't sure whether there was going to be a position open or not. But they did want a Santa Claus, because the fella before them, this was just on Christmas, because the fella before them had left, who had been the Santa Claus. So I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll take it on." It was only for a week. So they came out with the Santa Claus gear, and he was such a big man, this other chap, or the gear was so big, that anyway, he must have been a big bloke, because he'd split the trousers. And here I am sitting down in the shop with my beard, and my Santa Claus gear on, and I've got to hang on to the trousers at the back so that they don't open up with the split. And you wouldn't believe it, I finished up having to take them home at lunchtime, and Barbara had to stitch them up for me. So anyway, that was all right. I did the job, and when I went to get paid for that week, Robert said to me, well, he said that, look, the proper pay is so-and-so, say it was $10 an hour or something like that, and he said, look, I'll give you $8 an hour, but I can guarantee you a job in the new year. Now, you can either take the full pay and not keep the job, or, well, of course, you know what he's like. So I said, well, look, I'll take I'll take what you're offering. So I took it, and he did keep his word, and I did get a job there after the Christmas break, and I was there for quite a few years, and enjoyed it. Good job. It was a good job. But then they decided to refurbish the place, and there was jackhammers and drills, and I couldn't stand it, any row. And I'd had a barney with Robert because I'd stacked all this clothing away in order, like colour coordinated. He was a real fusspot, and I didn't mind that because it was that fair enough. It looked good. But he was such a pain. He wouldn't let you do anything on your own initiative, you know. Anyway, he came back and he looked at it and he said, oh no, it's round the wrong way or something other. And I said, oh Robert, look, fair dinkum. I said, I can't really remember what I did say to him, but anyway, he got real uptight. He said, well, come up to the office with me. Oh no, wait a minute, that was right. I don't know how it came about, but I said, you know, you should have the passageways cleared up in the stockroom. I said, it's dangerous. If there was a fire up there, someone could get injured or burnt. And I said, if the union, he said, don't you mention the union to me. He said, if you mention, anyone gets the union down here over this, I'll fire them. I said, you can't do that. He said, you just wait and see. You come with me. And he's talking to me like a little boy, and he's pointing to up the corridor, up to the office. So I went up to the office behind him, trailing behind like a little schoolboy, and he got in there and he said, whose name's that out the front of the shop? And I said, Johanna's. He said, that's right. Your name's not there, is it? No. But Robert, don't butt me, he said. Your name's not there, so you just do as you're told. And it was really nasty, and that finished it with me. I felt, well, that's right. And with the culmination of the alterations, I just quit. I was so damn glad when it finished, because he was a right pain in that regard. He was a different character outside of the shop, but in the shop he was a pain. I remember one little story before I left Hannah's. We had to go down to Melbourne twice a year, or Robert went down twice a year with Arnold and Max from the Manchester department, and they'd buy for the men's land, they called them the men's land. There was a conglomerate of all these shops, became a corporation, I suppose, called Men's Land, all little and medium-sized clothing stores became Men's Land, and they would you'd buy things down and buy clothing down at the Moonee Valley Racecourse, was where they had all the stuff on show, and you would buy things at a good price, and it'd be a nationwide selling scheme. They'd advertised under Men's Land, and you had to buy a certain amount of stuff out of each section. Pardon me. Anyway, the morning we went down, we left Armadale at 5 o'clock. There was Arnold, Maxie, myself and Robert, and we left Armadale at 5 o'clock, and as we were going past the airport at Armadale, there was a light plane taking off, and fair dinkum, Robert was driving so fast he beat the plane off the ground. We were doing about 140 all the way down to Melbourne. We got down to Melbourne at 7 o'clock that night. That was 14 hours from Armadale, and we stopped at Dubbo for breakfast, West Wyalong for lunch. And it was a really, really hairy drive down and a really, really hairy drive back again, because he came back a week later and he went just as fast. He did have a change of driver. When Max drove, they went a bit slower, but Robert was absolutely fired up, and that was certainly an experience. After I lost the job after I left the job at Hannah's, I got a job at the university at Armadale. I was very lucky to get that, because I'd been up to the university and seen a chap called Mr. McClelland, who was in charge of the cleaning staff up there, because I was told that there was a chance of a job. But when I went and saw him, he said, no, he said, I'm sorry, there's no vacancies at the moment. And he gave me no indication that there would be, but he said, you know, you can just keep trying. And then I went back down to the CES, and I struck a chap there who was a bowler at the Armadale Bowling Club where I was bowling at the time. And he said to me, how old are you? And I said I was 55, I think, at that time, 56. He said, you'd be eligible for a grant from the government to offset a full-time job for wages. You would get half the cost of your wages, and that would be paid to whoever employed you. In other words, if the job was going to pay me $350, they'd pay $175. So with that information, I shot up and saw McClelland again, and he said, well, if that's the case, he said, I'll see what I can do. And then about a fortnight or 3 weeks later, I got a letter to say I could start at the university on a temporary basis, 4 hours a day from 6 till 9. Is that right? 6, 7, 8, no, 5 to 9. And they would keep me on for 4 hours a day for at least 3 months. So I was quite happy with this idea, so I went up there and started off and worked really hard at it, you know, making a good impression. And at the end of the 3 months, they gave me an extension of 3 months, even though the grant actually, I think, had run out by then, but they were still happy to keep me on because I was such a good worker. And at the end of that 3 months, that's 6 months I'd had there, they gave me an extension of another 3 months. And then their money ran out as far as their wages, their amounts went. So it took me up to Christmas time, and he said to me, McLennan said to me, look, he said, I think I'll be able to put you on after Christmas because you did a pretty good job. And I waited on tenterhooks for a letter to say that I could start, and I got one to say begin up in January when the kids went back to the uni. Well, I was doing that for 3 months. That's right, I was put on the permanent staff of permanent casual. I was for three months. No, that's not right. Carrot, as you were. I was put on the permanent staff for 4 hours a day, from 5 to 9. But then the amalgamation took place between the College of Advanced Education and the university. And they'd had problems over there with the staff at the college who didn't like being told what to do by the university. And they were getting a bit Jacobite, so they asked me, McLennan asked me, if I would like a full-time job, and as a supervisor, I guess it was called, and in charge of the workers over there. So I said, you bet your life, because it was made a heck of a difference. Instead of getting $170 or whatever it was a week for the part-time work, I was going to get 300 and something. Poor old mum nearly thought she was winning the lottery every week. So I snapped it up and went over there, and fortunately, when I got over there, the real bad troublemakers had left, and there was only a cook on the Roy, who was a good worker, 2 sisters who were really good workers, had been with the uni for about 35 years, and a couple of real bludgers who I finished up getting transferred over to the main campus, and we did their work, and we did really well without them. I've saved them all at the university about, well, I think it was 3 actually I got rid of, sent them back over the other campus, and I think we saved them about the uni about $60,000, $70,000 a year out of that. It was quite a big saving. And I was there until they built the new administration building for nursing and teaching back on the main campus. Beautiful building, $7 million worth it was worth. And we were transferred back there to start the new year, which we went over there, and it was beaut. And then my knee was getting that crook at this time. I had this really bad knee that I was getting a bit fed up with it. I could hardly hobble around really. And then our daughter-in-law, Angela, talking to Mum on the phone one day, suggested that why don't we come down to Victoria, because you'll be closer to them and closer to Jim and Julie who had gone down there. And we thought about it, and I wasn't that fussed, but there again, Mum wanted to do it more so than I did. But anyway, I thought, well, yeah, okay, fair enough. So we packed up, and after a while sold the house. It was on the market for a little while. And we came down and stayed with Angela and Steve at Morwell, where they were renting. We were with them for 2 months. Angela kept saying, you know, Warragul was a good town. She'd been born there and brought up there for a while, and she thought it was a nice place to start to live in Melbourne, in Victoria. It was close to an hour and a half out of Melbourne by train, and it had a big swimming complex and a good bowling club, which I was doing bowling in those days. And it was a big hospital. Mum was very impressed with the hospital. So we shifted. It cost $10,000 altogether to go from Armadale to Melbourne for furniture removalists and costs for the new house we bought. Not that it was a new house, it was a 40-year-old house, but it was cost the other $4,000 was for fees and whatever. But it was amazing where we went to. But anyway, it was 10 grand we got. Did it cold on that deal, but still that was okay. And we've been here ever since. Then I had an operation on my knee. I got a specialist from Traralgon who comes up to Morwell, up to Warragul Hospital I should say, and being a pensioner and not paying any private health funds, I thought, oh dear, you know, I'll probably get anybody to do it, but he was a specialist. He did the operation, and it's about 3 years, 2 years since I've had it done, and it really is. It's been worth it. I mean, the agony I went through early in the piece when I had it first done, I swore I'd never have the other one done, but you can realise just as you start to walk better how important it is to have. Well, the other tape's petered out, so I'll have to start a new one. I don't know what I'm going to put on this because there's a lot of time on it, and I've just about told my life story. But anyway, the cost of shifting down here cost about 10 grand between the furniture removalists and all the fees for buying the house, which we finished up buying in Warragul, in Eustace Street. And it's right smack bang in the middle of Jim's place at Harkaway, where they now live, and Stephen and Angela's place at Jim and Julie's place at Harkaway. Can't let Julie out of this tape. And Angela and Stephen at Traralgon. After I'd been there for a few months, we moved here in June, that was right, and the following March I had my knee operated on up at Armadale, up at Warragul Hospital, and I had a complete knee replacement, which was a pretty painful episode, but also it fixed my leg up, and it's been really good. This year I won the B-grade bowls championship at the bowling club. My biggest win in my bowling career, which started back in 1963 in Perth. So it's taken a long while between drinks to really crack a decent win. I won a lot of minor things like table mats from the Commonwealth Bank and a tournament up at Armadale, and lots of losing and winning chooks, but nothing that have been any kudos to it. And had my photograph taken, and it was in the paper, and it was a real big deal. Really enjoyable. I tell you what, winners are winners and losers can please themselves. It's a dead set saying. I'm going to put a few silly little things on the tape now, because when I'm long gone, I hope some of my grandkids and great-grandkids, as well as my own kids, won't mind playing this tape and having a few reminiscing thoughts about days gone by. We used to have good fun the years gone by, and I remember, particularly on Colloy Plateau, we'd have these Saturday mornings at home. I wouldn't be working at Grace Brothers, this is when on Colloy Plateau, and we would be they'd all come into bed, Jim, Linda, Gail. I know whether Stevie used to be in it. He was only a little kid when we were first up the plane. We used to have these terrific wrestles in the bed on a Saturday morning. It used to be good fun, wrestling and laughing and jumping around. Don't know whether you kids remember it, but I do. It was good fun. I remember a trip we went down to Tartha one time in the bread van that I'd bought when I was doing a Brenda's run up at with the Fielders at the time, and Jim was sick at the very, very end of the trip from Sydney to Tartha. We just got into the grounds where we were going to get the caravan, and he spewed. And to think he hung on all that way down there, 500, 600 or something odd mile. I don't know how far it was down. It was a hell of a long way anyway. And he spewed up in the very last second. I remember getting out on a boat at Tartha with Jim and Julie. No, Jim and not Julie. Jim and Gail and Linda, Stevie, fishing. And all of a sudden we start to catch all these fish. Oh, gee, there was a stack of them. Yeah, little thoughts come back, you know. Jim coming home one day. Mum and I came home one Saturday morning. No. We got up one morning and there was a note on the table, on his dressing room table. Jim had written it. He's going to make his fortune. Ridden his bike down to Manly, I think, or something like that, and he'd got the bus over to St Leonard's, and then he got a train to Sydney. And he couldn't find a toilet or something, so he went down, got the ferry back home, I think it was, and he rode his bike. I don't know how he got there, but he took his bike, I think. He took the day bike. But anyway, he left a note to say he was going to make his fortune. We nearly freaked out. Anyway, he turned up home again about 12 o'clock. Yeah, good days, funny days. But we can see by the story I've moved around a lot. I think when Mum and Dad were alive, and before I got married, we'd moved 28 times. Mum and Dad and I had moved 28 times. Or I'd been dragged along at that time. And Barb and I've had a few since we've been married. Some really decent ones as far as mileage went. But anyway, we seem to be settled down now. I think they'll carry me out of this place. Very proud of all my children. Gail went off to England and on a trip, a holiday as it turned out. Not to be. And she's been over there for over 20 years now. But luckily we've been able to get over there a few times, thanks to Gail paying one of our fares on one of the times. One of the fares. And then fortunately they can come out to see us. I don't know how long that's going to carry on because it's the kids are all getting up to a full fare now, so maybe the kids will come out separately, Gail will come out on their own or something, but it's nice to see them every now and again, but we're shot our bolt as far as getting over there goes because we've got no more money left, not unless I win Lotto or something. Yeah, I'm real proud of all the kids. I mean, Jim's done well with his academic studies, and to be what he is now is really quite brilliant. And Stephen, to me too, he's done very, very well with his teaching and his books that he makes up, and I know he's sweating on getting into some other games and whatever later on down the track. I don't know when this tape will be played and whether he's done that. But you've all made me very proud of you. Minnie, she's had a battle along with Stevie there when he was cook. I don't know how that's going to turn out, but just hope that it works out well. And all in all, of course, the old Barbie cats stuck with me through thick and thin. Couldn't have done without her. She's the best girl he could possibly, best wife he could get. Real good sticker. Getting very nostalgic now, but it's true. I've had a good life, and it's just been not absolutely free of worry at all times, but that's what happens in life. You can't have a clear run all the time. And I'm just, as I say, I'm just very, very proud of all my children, and I just couldn't have a better wife. Now I might, and also all the grandkids. I mean, let's face it, up to this point of time, we've had Simon Peter, Danny, Timmy, Gabriel, that's Jim's family. In England there's Deborah, Mary, and Mark, that's Garden Rogers. Lindy's had Cherry. Then there's comes Stuart and Suzanne, and Stephen and Angie. Up to this time, or Angela, she's not called Angie. Up to this time, we've had little Jaden, our youngest one, at the time of this tape being made. And I just know Angela wants another 3 or 4, especially after the easy birth she had with Jaden. I'm very happy for all my daughter-in-laws, the 2 of you, and I'm very happy for my son-in-laws, the 2 of you. There's been some up and down hills to climb, but that's life. I think the biggest surprise to us all, though in a sense we'd all been praying for it, when I say surprise, I mean you hope and pray for things to happen, and when they do happen you are surprised, even though you have faith. But with Stephen's brain tumours disappearing from the x-rays, that was a really startling moment, and it really has to show you what can happen when you have faith and you pray a lot. I mean, I know the doctors can't wear miracles. They always put it down to something else. But to Christians, that was a dead set miracle. You just don't drop 4 tumours off an x-ray screen and say it just happened. You know, it was it's whatever they think it is. It just doesn't happen like that. And now I might just jump into a few little sayings and a few little songs, maybe for the grandkids, the littlest grandkids. You can put up with a pretty hopeless voice. But anyway, here's one I think some of you might know. Under the daisies and under the trees, here lies the body of Solomon Pease. Pease is not here, only the pod. Pease shelled out, went home to God. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. If you don't like my figure, keep your face off my bust. Oh, when the Führer says we is the master race, we howl, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace, so we howl, right in the Führer's face. Ich bin not the Superman, den Führer Superman. Ja, wie ist der Superman, super duper Superman. Is this Nazi land so good? Would you leave it if you could? Ja, this Nazi land is good. We would leave it if we could. We bring the world's new order. Heil Hitler's world new order. Everyone, creed and race, must love the Führer's face when we bring you his new order. Oh, and the Führer says we is the master race. We howl, right in the Führer's face. Not to love the Führer is a great disgrace, so we howl, right in the Führer's face. Sambo had an uncle very rich. Oh, one day he said to Sambo, I'll give you 2 and 6. Sambo, feeling very thirsty, went up to the shop. 10 lemonades and 10 gingerbeers, and Sambo went off pop. Oh, bang goes the undertaker, 7 and 6 to the tombstone maker. Off to the local cemetery, on his tombstone you will see Sambo, that's me. Sambo had an auntie very poor. One day she said to Sambo, I'll make you scrub the floor. Sambo, feeling very tired, went upstairs to bed. He tried to slide the banister, but fell down on his head. Oh, bang goes the undertaker, 7 and 6 to the tombstone maker. Off to the local cemetery, on his tombstone you will see Sambo, that's me. Izzy and Ozzy Lizzy, Izzy and Ozzy Lizzy, aye, is it because he is an Aussie that he keeps you busy? Lizzy, has he jazzy ways, and does he make you go off fuzzy? Was he cut you dizzy? Has he Lizzy, Izzy and Ozzy Lizzy, aye? Many years ago when I was 23, I was married to a widow who was pretty as could be. This widow had a grown-up daughter who had hair of red. My father fell in love with her and soon they were to wed. This made my dad my son-in-law and changed my very life. For my daughter was my mother, 'cause she was my father's wife. To complicate the matter, even though it brought me joy, I soon became the father of a bouncing baby boy. My little baby then became a brother-in-law to Dad, and so became my uncle, though it made me very sad. For if he was my uncle, then that also made him brother of the widow's grown-up daughter, who of course was my stepmother. And father's wife then had a son who kept them on the run. He became my grandchild, for he was my daughter's son. My wife is now my mother, and it makes me blue, because although she is my wife, she's my grandmother too. Now if my wife is my grandmother, then I'm her grandchild, and every time I think of it, it nearly drives me wild. For now I have become the strangest case you ever saw. As husband of my grandmother, I am my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa. I'm my own grandpa. It sounds funny, I know, but it really is so. I'm my own grandpa. Well, I don't know. And now for the family song that has been passed down from generation to generation. Can't go on, everything I have is gone. Stormy weather, since my man and I ain't together. It's raining all the time, life is bare, gloom and misery everywhere. Stormy weather, since my man and I ain't together. It's raining all the time. Well, guess that's about it, people. I've just about finished the story. I hope you've enjoyed it. I forgot to mention one major, probably the most major thing in my life actually, was becoming a Christian, accepting Jesus Christ as my Saviour. I know over the years, when the kids were small, and I remember when Jim was talking about going in the ministry at one stage, I really got cranky. And he said, they're all pretty smart people. They've all got BAs and so on. I said, what's a BA? That means bugger all, I said. But anyway, I changed. And it was a funny thing, when I finally did become a Christian, Linda, I think it was, said to me, one of the kids anyway, said to me, you had no chance, Dad. We've been praying for you for years to change and accept Christ. And I did. I know J.C. Reiher, he's an old Archbishop or Bishop of England in the last century. He wrote somewhere down the line when I read the book, some Christians have a very little faith. But he said, they're like ships, sailing ships, that have been through a terrible storm. they've got their sails torn to shreds and their masts are broken, but they limp into port. And he said, they're saved from sinking. And he said, even if you've only got a small bit of faith in Jesus Christ, you're still saved. And I look back at that sometimes and I think, gee, you know, you do things in your life, since being a Christian actually, that I blame at top at times and swear a bit and things like this, and then I think, oh gee, I've done the wrong thing again. You ask for forgiveness and you think, gosh, how much can God put up with you, you know? But there again, it says we've got to forgive everybody 70 times 7, and I must be getting close to that 490 times. But anyway, you know, kids, it was a great thing that really did happen in my life. And while I possibly mightn't be what I regard as, I look around me and see other people who are Christians and I think, gee, well, you know, you're down the scale a bit. I'm still saved. That's the main thing. Anyway, children and adults and whoever's listening to this tape, I'm going to finish it now and wish you all a long and happy life. There'll be ups and downs, but that's what it's all about. So for now, bye.